Hey folks, this is Joe Rule with the Bold Visions podcast, where I interview people who work with disruptive technology about how to tell better stories about tech. Show notes and links for this episode can be found at raconteuranimation.com/podcast. And as always, this episode is sponsored by Raconteur Animation. Today on the show, I spoke with Tom Moore, the founder and CEO of ProvisionAi, which is a supply chain software company. Tom has been instrumental in developing cutting-edge solutions for warehousing, truck loading, and network optimization for industry giants like Procter Gamble, Unilever, Nestle, and Kimberly-Clark. Among his notable contributions are groundbreaking software systems such as AutoScheduler, AutoO2, and LevelLoad. And we talk about all three of those systems and what each of them does in the episode, as well as the origins of his companies, and in particular AutoScheduler. Be sure to tune in to, I think it's episode number 2 with Keith Moore, who is the current CEO of AutoScheduler. So in the beginning of the episode, Tom explains the origins of the different companies and tools that he and his teams have created. Then he talks about some of the problems in the trucking industry that's primarily due to the relationship between shippers and carriers, kind of the dynamics there in how they negotiate. And then in 2023, which is last year as of this recording, ProvisionAi, his company, removed 88,000 trucks from the road. And we go into what exactly that means. And then Tom talks about their goals to actually surpass that number this year in 2024. Then towards the end, Tom tells a story about how their sales are based around hard numbers and data when they're actually talking to customers in the early stages. And then we close the episode by discussing his longer-term goals in reducing carbon emissions, removing more trucks from the road, and just overall doing good in the world. So thanks so much for tuning in to listen, and I hope you enjoy this deep dive into the world of logistics with Tom Moore. Hey, Tom, thanks so much for coming on the show. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for giving me the time.
Absolutely. So we had actually connected through a close relative of yours, Keith, who runs, he's the CEO of AutoScheduler, which I believe is a company that you founded, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I founded it, and he's actually the person who's basically launched it. I mean, It's one thing to build part of the rocket. It's the other thing to actually get it off the ground and get it going into space. And that's certainly what he's succeeding in doing.
Yeah, for sure. So I thought we could kind of start in that ballpark. I'm curious if you could tell the story of ProvisionAi and AutoScheduler and kind of where those companies came from and what they are. And I'm also especially curious about their connection to New Zealand and your connection to New Zealand as well, and kind of how that all works, because you're not there anymore. So yeah.
Okay, let's take the easy one first. I was born and raised in Christchurch, New Zealand, went to university in New Zealand, have a degree in mathematics and another one in operations research from New Zealand universities. And I came to the US theory for a year, but that was more than 40 years ago. So never left, loved this place. And essentially, we've used mathematics and technology to solve business problems. Okay? And if you think about one of the business problems that we were approached by Procter Gamble to solve was, how do we pick cases and put them on a truck in such a way that it doesn't require a whole bunch of skill to do it? Hey, we want to be able to put basically semi-skilled or unskilled folks into the warehouse and have them pick cases and load trucks. And can we have a system to guide it? And oh, by the way, if we do that, we think we'll save a significant amount of time and effort in doing that. So I was asked that question, and I called up some of my friends in New Zealand and said, hey, think we could do this? And they go, yeah, sure. So we were in the software business, okay? And that's not the way you're supposed to get into the software business, but essentially we were solving a problem that nobody else had solved before. And to my knowledge, there are very few folks who have solved it since. It is a very complex mathematical problem because what you're trying to do is manage a number of competing things. Competing thing number one is, what's the customer want? That's sort of most important. Competing thing number two, how do we maximize productivity? Competing thing number three is, how do we actually stack things one on top of the other so we don't put the bricks on top of the eggs, we put the eggs on top, all these basic things. And then once we've built the pallets, how do we actually fit that Tetris puzzle that's the truck together to make it all not just damage free when the driver puts his foot on the brakes, but also how do we make the axles legal when it goes over the scale? So very difficult problem. The good news is my friends and now partners in New Zealand have been very successful in working out how to do that and frankly deliver a very good product that's been doing that for many, many years. We've picked millions of cases already today in 4 continents around the world. So awesome. That's how we got into the business. Now we go, hold on, we're at the warehouse. The warehouse is down here, and you know what happens when you say stuff flows downhill? Well, once it gets to the warehouse, it's a little too late to quote, fix it. So what we wanted to do was get up ahead of that and say, how do we take what we know about how things are going to fit together in the truck, and how do we maximize those loads? And that's where we came up with this concept of AutoO2, automatic order optimization, that creates the best possible orders that maximize the use of the truck. Now, what's that do for everybody? Okay, well, for you and I, it's good because we took 88,000 trucks off the road last year. And 88,000 truck journeys means it's a little easier for you to cross the road. Because we eliminated those trucks, we shipped fewer trucks but the same amount of product. Because we eliminated all those trucks, what did we gain? Well, for the people who are paying for the trucks, they paid for fewer trucks, so that's a big savings. For the Scope 3 emissions, the carbon emissions, those are down. So it was a really good way of getting into the business, okay, and of saying, how do we take the biggest cost in the whole supply chain, transportation, and how do we reduce it for the shipper? Okay, so it's worked out very, very well. But you said, how do I get into the software business overall? And there are a number of things. First of all, we have to be confronted by a problem. Okay, somebody has to come to us and say, hey, this is a problem. This is a pain point where I see things. Everyone knew the pain point of damage. Everyone knew the pain point of transportation costs. But at one point in time, some good folks from Procter Gamble came to us and said, we've got another pain point in the warehouse, that how well the warehouse runs depends on who's running the shift. How do we make it independent of the person who's running the shift? Can you work on that? Pick up the phone, talk to my partners in New Zealand and say, how do we do this? And ultimately, they came up with a solution which became AutoScheduler. Okay. Look at all the bits and pieces that need to be done, look at all the resources you've got to do it, and work through that whole process and be able to project forward for a day or 2 or 3, all the activities are going to happen, and be proactive about avoiding some challenge like, oh, gee, second shift tomorrow, we're going to short customer X. How do we not short customer X? Well, what do we have to do? Those kinds of things that AutoScheduler is very good at. And I will say that since those days, Keith and the other folks at AutoScheduler have completely reprogrammed what we built more than 10 years ago. So always you're on that constant move. And the last problem that we have been confronted with is we show people, hey, you can ship fewer loads. And one of the guys came back to us and said, look, don't worry about shipping fewer loads. I just like it more consistent. He said, how is it that one day I'm being asked as a transportation manager to ship 25 loads on this lane, and the next day I'm being asked to ship 3? He says, can't we just smooth that out? And the short answer was, you need to manage customer service, but instead of looking at a short time horizon, let's look at a much longer time horizon and understand what we can do and how we can put all the pieces together to make sure that things become smooth. And that was the genesis of what we call LevelLoad.
Okay.
And God bless J. Rich III, who came up with that challenge, because he made it very clear, hey, we need to fix this. If you think about it, the planning guys who sit in their offices go, oh, yeah, we just did a good job because the planning system told us we needed to move all this product from here to here, and we need to move this product from there to there. And we've got those orders into the system. We're done. Right? Unfortunately, they don't know what's going on downstream that their actions cause problems. So, for example, I used the 24 and 3. That's actual example for one of our clients, 24 shipments one day, 3 the next. But there's lots of other implications that go on, okay? And those downstream pains is that, you got to load those 24 trucks. Do you have the labor to do it? You got to unload those 24 trucks. How many are going to sit out in the yard for multiple days while you wait to get the labor to unload them? How many customers are going to come in and say, I need product, and that product's on truck number 19 that you haven't gotten around to unloading yet, so you cut that order. So lots and lots and lots of challenges associated with planning being basically disconnected from operations. And unfortunately, those are costly challenges. Okay? It's costly to the shipper because when you're shipping a lot more trucks than normal, you've got to find those trucks, and hopefully you got to find trucks that carriers that you can trust and who can do it at a price that's appropriate. Okay. The second piece is not only you have to manage around that, you as an operator have to go back to the carrier and say, well, yesterday I wanted 25 trucks, I only want 3 today. So all the trailers that these got sitting in your yard are now going to be sitting there for another day or another few days waiting for loads. So we're hurting the carriers, and the carriers see significant benefits if we can smooth things out. But most importantly, we shouldn't hurt the customer, okay? So understanding that that level of customer service has to be maintained means that sometimes you're going to take things that have got low inventory and pull them forward, and some things that you say, I can live without that for another day, you might want to push back. So the push and pull over a period of time enables you to level things out over time. So, if you look out 30 days, you've got a much better picture of what's likely to happen, rather than the planning guys who's normally looking, on a Monday, say, what am I going to ship on Wednesday to deploy on Wednesday? And you go, what about Thursday? What about Friday? What are you looking at into the future to manage what you need to pull forward or what you could push back? And the last point on this is the receiving locations don't just receive product from one location, right? They receive it from multiple plants potentially. We're working with a company that has a little warehouse, little by their standards, out on the Pacific Northwest. Warehouse has 14 different supply points. How do you coordinate 14 different planners? Okay. I suggested that they put a boxing ring in their offices so that you could fight over who actually wins the volume. But yeah, clearly there's a challenge here, just the sheer coordination and knowing that these 14 different sites are shipping with different lead times. One's going to take 2 days to get there, and one's going to take 15 days to get there. Well, okay, how do you manage the receiving location when you've got that level of complexity? So key point, want to make sure everybody understands there's a problem.
That's a lot. That's a very complex, multifaceted problem for sure. It seems like to me what it comes down to, and that you kind of said this before, before we started recording, was this is ultimately a bunch of silos that are not communicating with each other. That's am I understanding it correctly that more or less what you guys do is you get everybody talking to each other, and that the software facilitates that exchange between parties?
In essence, yes, but it's not like people are actually having communications. Again, I gave you the example of the 14 sites. It's really saying, gee, this warehouse over here is getting full. Let's push less stuff into that warehouse. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This warehouse over here has capacity. Maybe we can put a little more into there. This operation, you can only unload 10 trucks tomorrow for whatever reason. Well, how do we make sure we don't ship them 20? It's all those things, those logistical constraints that we have that the operations guys know about. They have no way of really effectively making that be baked into the supply planning system. So the supply planning system goes blindly on its way, doing what it was designed to do, which is say, how do I maximize service for any customer coming into my warehouse in Chicago? Now, that's what it's designed to do. And it does it very effectively and frankly doesn't care about capacity limits or cost or any of those other things. It's just sort of like Rhett Butler. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
So I had actually asked Keith what we should talk about, and
This could be dangerous.
no, it's benign. And he said to ask you, trucking is a massive component of our GDP in the U.S. It's a really big economic contributor, and he suggested I ask you, why is it planned so poorly? What are the determining factors behind it that are, causing this inefficiency?
I'm going to go out into sort of the macro view for a second. And the macro view is we have these boom times and everybody wants to get into the trucking business, and you order trucks and you've got a 14-year lead time. I'm exaggerating, but it's a 2-year lead time to get trucks. Okay. And pre-COVID, this is where we were. I mean, we were running like crazy. I sat with a guy who'd just been made head of transportation. He'd never done transportation before, and I'm having lunch with him. And I said to him, remember the movie Airplane? And he goes, well, what the hell are you talking about? He said, well, I said, you've joined the trucking business, and at the very time that the movie Airplane said, I chose a bad day to give up drinking, and I chose a bad day to give up smoking. And I chose a bad time to give up drugs and sniffing glue. He came in at the worst time to get carrier capacity. Okay? Very, very tough. Now, the pendulum swung, right? We've got trucking companies going out of business left and right. Thousands of them are going out of business. The profitability of all the top carriers has turned negative for the most part on their truckload business. JB Hunt lost money. Knight lost money. Okay? Everybody's losing money, which means the rates aren't sustainable because shippers, and you look after yourself, push rates down, and carriers are eager to get business because anything's better than nothing, right? So now you're sitting in a situation where you've got a bust cycle. So we just had the boom cycle. We're now in the bust cycle. When the next boom cycle happens, what's going to happen? Same thing again, right? Mm-hmm. And my take is it's really important to think long term when we deal with carriers. And it's very difficult to do that for most publicly traded companies because, hey, I'm going to pay you an extra dime a mile to keep you in business. Gee, I'm not prepared to do that because my boss will come in and tell me I should have had a better rate. So we've got a fundamental problem, and you're going to hear it from me now, that when the economy turns back up, we're going to have a real problem. The problem is not just a shortage of, or will not be a shortage of trucks. It's also a shortage of drivers. It's a shortage, and it's a shortage of I'll call it willingness to pay. Okay, and just to be clear, I'm not a huge supporter of trucking companies because I think they make a lot of bad decisions. But the trucking industry is incredibly fragmented, and because it's incredibly fragmented, they are very quick to go to price as a way of managing downturns in volume. And the big carriers, the top 5 carriers represent less than 5% of our total truckload business in North America. And so they've got no leverage. Contrast that with UPS and FedEx. 2 carriers represent 80%, 90% of the non-Amazon business. And they kind of go like, hey, we're only going to put our prices up 5%. And, they'll go, I mean, I'm not implying collusion, but clearly there's only 2 players in the market. So you mirror what the other guy's done. It's just a question of who moves first. Okay. So a lot easier to maintain margins. And don't get me wrong, UPS and FedEx are both starting to suffer, right? So you've got to look at the dominance of certain players in the marketplace, okay? And we just don't have that in trucking. So I'm going to get back to your original question once I remember what it is.
It was
maybe you can help me.
Why is trucking planned so poorly? Like the planning behind it.
From a company perspective, on an execution basis, when you're making things happen every day, the general assumption is, look, there are lots of truckers out there. I can get whoever I want, and I can do it in a moment's notice. So in theory, we can get an infinite number of trucks when we need them. Again, going back to my example of 24 trucks one day, 3 the next, we can turn them on and off like we turn on and off the spigot in the sink. What does that mean? Well, it means that we don't actually consider the whole supply chain. Mm-hmm. There's a guy called George Lowry who's an analyst, and he said in a very insightful way, he says, why aren't we as companies planning transportation the same way we plan production, the same way we plan our warehouses, the same way we plan everything? Well, the main reason is because we don't care. For the carrier, we can just turn them on and off. When times get tough, prices go up and we get capacity limitations, we then start to go, oh, gee, we need to do something about how we manage our carriers. And one of the things a lot of companies have done is they've gone out and created a private fleet. Well, now that times are easier, private fleets are actually starting to retrench. So what are we going to have? Fewer private fleets or fewer dedicated contract carriage results. So, again, the results for JB Hunt, they talked about their ability to make money in dedicated. And for the first time in a long time, they made less money, a lot less money. And why? Well, the fleet's smaller. People are turning in pieces of equipment and saying, hey, we don't need it. They have to sell that equipment on the secondary market. The secondary market's not strong. Again, it's that cascading of major economic circumstances down to the bottom lines of trucking companies. So when we start talking about planning of transportation, we see a huge value in the level loading concept, where we can say we're going to reduce the ups and downs. And one of our clients, they've reduced it by about 60%. Okay.
Wow.
What does that mean to the carrier? It means to the carrier that they've got a fairly predictable band. We're going to ship between 6 and 8 trucks or 6 and 10 trucks on average every day. Well, it's a lot easier to plan for that, right? You can position equipment efficiently. And when you look at how carriers come up with rates, they look at that huge variability too, because if they say, gee, 24 trucks, I can't even handle half of those, but my shipper is going to ask me to do it. So I'm going to deadhead equipment from further away. I'm going to spend more money to service him. So they build that into the price. So the terminal costs at the origin and somewhat at the destination are built into the price that they put on that particular lane for that particular customer. Okay. And people will say, well, this can't be, but if you look at a location and say, hey, the shipping from Edison, New Jersey to Chicago is currently costing us X, but why are you charging an extra $500 to go to a place that's 20 miles this side of Chicago? Well, it's because it takes so much longer to unload at that particular site, and you have a lot more downtime or equipment being held waiting for something to happen. And so they build that into the price. What we've found, and we can't prove this, by the way, just to be clear, is that prices have come down as we've looked at reducing the total variability. But I can't say that that's 100% because we reduce the variability or because the market's doing this. It's probably a bit of both.
Right. It's a powerful story, a powerful value proposition, ultimately, what you're talking about there. So I'm curious, one of the things that I read on your website was that in 2023, you eliminated 88,000 trucks on the road. Your goal for this year is to eliminate 188,000. So
ambitious goal, by the way. Very ambitious goal.
So I'm curious how's that going, and what's your plan to get there?
Essentially, what we're doing is going out to get more customers, and each customer we can then calculate how much they are likely to save in terms of number of loads. So if you've got a customer that's doing 10,000 loads a year, and we can save 5 to 10%, so there's 1,000 loads, right? So we've got to find a lot of shipments that are going that we can add our expertise to drive that number down. And, I will tell you, that's called marketing hype. Okay. That's called marketing hype. I believe it's quite achievable to get maybe 120, but I'm not going to hold my sales and marketing folks feet to the fire. But realistically, we think that this is just such a good opportunity that we should be pursuing it with all haste. Not just for the savings, but for the carbon, for the reduction, for the value for you and I crossing the street.
For sure. And I did notice that you were doing a lot of, you really ramped up your content production recently, at least on YouTube and LinkedIn, that kind of thing. Is that part of kind of this initiative to get the word out then and start educating people on this?
Yeah, our approach up until relatively recently was we didn't have a marketing force and we didn't have a sales force, okay? So you put those two things together, you say, well, how are you growing? Well, we've been growing rather nicely, but it's predominantly through word of mouth and through company A splits, or somebody leaves company A and goes to company B and they say, hey, we want you to come and work for us at company B because we see the value in what you're doing. And that's been predominant growth. We can't stay at that, okay? If we're going to make the goals, we have to do more and more to grow the business. Hence, we're talking to you,
very good.
right?
Yeah, that's what part of what we do, for sure. So one of the things that when I talked to Keith in his episode was that there's with anything supply chain, it's mission critical. That you can't break the system in order to innovate, in order to change. And I'm guessing as part of the story that you're telling, or part of the response that you get, is maybe people pushing back, like, look, it works, don't break it. We're concerned about things becoming a problem. So I'm curious, is that a problem, and how do you handle that with and having these conversations?
Let's talk load optimization for a minute. We hear back from a lot of people, oh, our loads are always full. Well, they are? Oh, yeah, every time, always. We never ship a truck that's not completely full. And we work with some of the best run companies in the world, and we know that before we were working with them, there was an opportunity to improve load factor, 5-10%. Okay? So you're better than these companies out there, boom, boom, boom. And they go, well, we're certainly on par with them. Okay, well, we can save them that amount of money, and we'll take some of your data and we'll either prove you right or prove us right. And after we take the data and run it through our system, they go, oh, yeah, nice opportunity here. Okay. I was talking to a company this morning, looked at their data. They're a pretty well-run company. We can save 5.2% for them. Okay. And they go, can we see the background data? So I show them every truck that we built, every single one. And the guy goes, yep, okay, I understand. I see how you've done it. I could not do that manually in 1,000 years. I understand the need now, and I understand the benefits. So we put those two things together. We've now got a champion who's going to go out and start working on getting us to the next level.
So you're actually able to, you do a demo. In other words, like you start doing the calculations and actually show the results. Then
we take actual data from the client. These are the shipments we made last month on these 3 lanes. And when we take that data from the last 3 lanes and run it through, they say, well, historically we did this lane last month with 47 shipments. And we did it with, making the numbers up, 45. That's about a 5% savings. So, gee, show me the lack of logic in that. It's just so follows along their data, their situation, they understand. So probably the biggest challenge in doing one of those things is they send us data and they go, well, here's the data. and there's missing weights and there's missing dimensions and there's missing this and missing that. So we have to do a fix of the item master first to get them to a point where they can run the data. And that's a critical factor. We run on data, we live on data, and we need accurate data.
So you're able to also come alongside them and help them improve the data then before you can even start to work.
That's a critical factor that we continue to work on, right? How do we get that number right? And how do we get that number right? I mean, we can see, this is my mistake on Friday. I had a client look at some of their data and he said, well, boy, that's a heavy case. It was 1,499 pounds. Actually, it was 14.99 pounds, but somebody had left the decimal place off when they sent it to us. And we now had a 1,499 pound case. And it was like, oh, geez, we're not going to win on that one. So I hope we caught that and had raised it to him before he raised it and brought it to us. But this was a management level guy, and we send our data analysis back to people who are on the firing line more than the management level.
Gotcha. So I know we're coming up on time here. I'd like to ask you, what are your goals for the future? Where do you want to take ProvisionAi and these tools in the future? What's that vision?
I would love to take some large number of trucks off the road, whether it's 188,000 or 200,000 or 250 or whatever the number is. I mean, I think that's a worthwhile goal. And our team, all the people who work in this, they understand that. They understand what we're doing is fundamentally good. Okay, we are driving a significant improvement for everybody. And so my goal here is just to continue to expand that. Okay. At some point in time, I'm going to get old and decrepit and not do this anymore. And I'm hoping we have a team, people who are already in place, who can continue to rise to the occasion and carry this on, because this is worthwhile stuff that we do. Okay, I always want to say, we're not giving razor blades to babies. We are actually helping society as we do this stuff.
For sure. It's amazing to me in seeing your company and also others, just how many opportunities there are in unexpected places to improve our efficiency, to help with, make the earth a healthier place, to make people's lives better. It's quite remarkable.
The challenge is some things historically it's just been too hard. Physically, operationally, computer horsepower, too hard. Computer horsepower is improving. AI is coming more into the picture. Mathematical programming's been there for ages, but never been able to be used because we didn't have the horsepower to do it. So we're getting to a point now where we can unlock a lot of these things, and that's a good thing. That is a really good thing. We just have to make sure we do that.
So kind of wrapping things up here, do you have any asks for the audience, or kind of final messages or final takeaways for people listening?
I'd love to say, hey guys, call us, which is always a good thing to do. But go on our website, take a look around. There's a lot of educational material there, and there's also a lot of commercial material. Shameless commerce. We're in business to make money, but we're also, again, trying to do the right thing by our clients, our carriers, and the people on the street. So, go to our website, ProvisionAi.com, spend some time, understand, ask questions. We'll reach back for you if you have a good question.
Perfect. And what's the best way to contact you or your team?
Tom.Moore@ProvisionAi.com.
And you're on YouTube and LinkedIn as well, I believe.
We're on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube. These marketing folks are very effective, even though they tell stretching stories.
True, yeah. All marketers are liars or /storytellers.
Storytellers.
Yeah, I'll be sure to link to all of those things in the episode here so they're easily accessible.
Thanks, Joe. And we should have another dialogue at another time, which is perhaps more focused on business and how we can help you. Okay?
Sounds good. I'd love to chat. Thanks so much for coming on, Tom.
Thank you, sir.